I want to start off asking you a question, and then I'm going to pass it on, and others will ask you questions. So my experience is that each week I feel really excited and interested as we focus on one aspect of the sutta, hindrances, mental factors, whatever it is. And then we move on, and I feel like, oh, I forgot what last week or 3 weeks or 10 weeks ago was, and I'm focused on the current material, but I have this sense of kind of anxiety about what I've forgotten. And so my question to you is that inevitable, and do you have any suggestions?
In some way, I think it is inevitable because there's so much material. So much. You know, and in the sutta itself, the Buddha laid out so many different ways of practicing. And I don't think the idea is to necessarily keep them all in mind all the time and intentionally trying to have them present. You know, that would be impossible. What I think might be helpful, and of course this is the Vipassana practice, is to really pay attention in any sitting, even at, let's say, after you've devoted yourself to exploring a particular instruction, then to sit in a more open awareness. Not necessarily to do that for the whole sitting or every sitting during the week, but to give some time to it, then to sit in an open awareness and really become mindful of whatever is predominant. And what's arising predominantly will be in one of the 4 Satipatthanas. So it's a chance to integrate as much as you remember anyway. You know, throughout the week.
That's helpful.
Yeah. So I wouldn't stay exclusively with just one instruction. Right. Even though you give emphasis to it for some time in the week.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to pass you on to the next person.
Hello, Joseph. I'm Hal.
Hi, Hal.
Thank you so much for doing this. That's much appreciated. And in recent weeks, we were talking about mental factors, and I was really kind of struck by one of the phrases that she used in the book. And I'm hoping you can elaborate on the concept that the someone behind experience does not exist.
Well, I think there's a problem even in the way the question was formulated, because in the formulation of the question, you're already positing a someone who doesn't exist.
Yes.
So that someone is not there in the first place.
And I think that's part of what...
There are different, you know, the understanding of selflessness, of course, takes a long time. It's so counterintuitive, you know, that it really takes a long time of just sitting with the idea, both on a conceptual level, just trying to understand it intellectually, conceptually, and then applying it in the practice. Just a couple of the ways of specific practices that I found helpful in that. And I don't know whether you've come to this part of the book or not. When I talked about reframing the way we're languaging the experience to ourselves in the passive voice. Did you read that yet or not?
Yes, yes.
I found that sort of a very direct, immediate way into sort of an immediate connection with the experience of selflessness, of just a sound being known or a sensation being known. because the language itself, the I, the self, is not in the construct, you know, and to see how spontaneously the being known happens. No one is there doing anything. It happens completely by itself. You know, when you hear a sound, or even, I don't know, it may be a little difficult doing it with the sound of my voice because you're connecting with the conceptual level, but in just hearing sound, you know, the sound of a bell or the background sounds, how they appear and are known, no one is there. It's just the sound is being known. Okay. I was working with somebody who's fairly new to practice, just has been practicing a couple of years, you know, was really trying to kind of get a handle on this whole experience of selflessness. And I had mentioned this particular technique to him, and it took him a while. I mean, the first few times we talked about it, he didn't really connect. But he kept at it, and at a certain point, it's like he understood what that was about. And all of a sudden, and the way he expressed it to me, he said he felt like it was a very immediate entree to that experience of selflessness. So I don't know the degree to which you've actually, you know, used that as a tool, but it might be worth persevering with it. Okay. Okay. And again, it's not, I found it particularly helpful in the walking practice, because in the walking meditation, there's really no struggle to find the object. You know, it's the sensations of the movement are so apparent, and so it's easy to relax into the body. It's almost like you're doing Tai Chi, or, you know, slow down. It's just the movement, and in the movement, the sensations of the movement are being known. Okay. You know, and they're being known absolutely simultaneous with their arising. It's not that there's anyone waiting to know. Right? The knowing is just happening exactly in the moment. So the sensations are being known. And you could repeat that occasionally. It's not like that becomes a mantra, but just as a way of settling into that frame of reference. Right. You know, okay, so the sensations are just being known, and then you're in that experience of them being known. And I think at a certain point you'll see that is completely effortless. You know, there's no struggle in that experience, and it may give you a very clear sense of this whole notion that there's no one there behind the process. So I think it's worth persevering a bit with it.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. Next. Oh.
Just let me say that in response to any of your questions, you know, if you want to if something's not clear or you need a follow-up, it's fine.
Okay. Hi, Joseph. I'm Jackie.
Hi, Jackie.
Thank you for being here. My question is concerning how to discern between wholesome and unwholesome. I've been thinking a lot about that, and I have some ideas about how I experience that discernment, in that perhaps when something is unskillful or unwholesome, I have a certain sensation in my body, a sensation that there's maybe some resistance or something there, agitation or something. But I wanted to know what your thinking was about discerning between wholesome and unwholesome.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a great question, because it's so key to the whole unfolding path. I think your way of doing it is really a good one. You know, paying attention to the body, because in the unwholesome mind states, there's always some kind of unease. Even with the pleasant ones, you know, even when there's desire or some manifestation of greed, there's some kind of tightening. Did you get to the place in the talks of the book when I was talking about, you know, walking down Fifth Avenue in New York and looking?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it was on the hindrance of desire, and just the difference between wanting and not wanting, you know, and the going from some kind of contraction, even in what seems pleasurable, and then feeling the ease of not wanting. It's like, feels like we're let out of the grip of something. So paying attention to the body in that way, I think, is really helpful. Also, if you hold that question, you know, as you're engaged either in various activities or just watching your mind, you know, through the day, and you hold that question, you know, is this wholesome or unwholesome? It would be interesting just for you to connect with your intuition about it, because I think we actually already know. You know, sometimes we override the knowing. We don't want to know. Sometimes when it's unwholesome, because for whatever reason we're conditioned or habituated or wanting to continue with it. But I think there's some place in us that know, oh yeah, this. If we take the moment to stop and check in, which often we don't do, you know. But if we do, then yeah, I would see if you learn anything from connecting with your intuition and about it. You know, is this wholesome? Is this unwholesome? And then check to see whether it's accurate or not.
Even noting the rationalization that
yeah,
I
exactly.
have for doing something that I know is unwholesome.
Yeah, I mean, we all do it. If we didn't have that pattern, we'd be saints. You know, so we all have that, and so it's a good field of observation. So the key, of course, and I have a sense you're already doing this, is to be able to investigate this without self-judgment. You know, and so when we see the unwholesome aspects in the mind, you know, at a certain point, and this was in a way a turning point for me in my practice, when I became happy to see the defilements, because I would rather see them than not see them. You know, so instead of kind of the initial response of just judging myself for, oh, there I go again. Oh yeah, Mara, I see you. And there's a kind of joy in that. There's a kind of delight in the seeing. So I think this investigation is really good. As I say, checking in with the body, and then also trusting your intuition.
Thank you.
There's also, I don't know if you remember, there were 4 unwholesome mental factors which are present in every unwholesome mind state. And I'm not sure I remember all the 4 offhand, but one was restlessness in the mind. One was, you know, the hiri otapa, it's often translated as moral shame and moral dread, which is not really very good translations, but it's the lack of that. It's the lack of considering, oh, this is not a good thing to be doing. You know, when we don't bring that, and delusion, that was the 4th one. But the one that struck me particularly was to really look for the quality of restlessness. That I found that pretty interesting, that in every unwholesome mind state, that's there. So that can be really subtle, but an interesting, I think really interesting to see, it's when the mind is restless that it goes for the unwholesome.
It's sort of an intention or leaning toward something.
Yeah, or just we're restless, and in some way we think that whatever the unwholesome act may be is going to make us feel better.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think it's a really important investigation. And,
I'll be working on that.
Yeah. One of the phrases that you find in the text, which can be a useful just tool, I call it wagging the finger at Mara. So often in the text, the Buddha will say, Mara, I see you. So when we see an unwholesome state of, oh, Mara, I see you, it helps to disengage.
Yes, makes sense. Thank you.
Good luck.
Hi, Joseph. I'm Jeff.
Hi.
So after immersing yourself in the Satipatthana Sutta, which, by the way, I'm enjoying going into detail each week, the detail that you go into, but after you yourself have immersed yourself in it for a few years and now taught it, are there one or two essentials that stand out for you?
Well, not so much in terms of particular objects to note. Two things come to mind. I haven't really thought of it in that way, so your question is, I'm responding off the top of my head at the moment. Two things are coming to mind. One is understanding that one of the meanings of sati, of mindfulness, and kind of the root meaning of it, is to remember. Right? And so, kind of highlighting that in the practice, it's not difficult to be mindful, it's difficult to remember to be mindful. And remembering that.
Right.
Because we can get so caught up in wanting to be mindful, and efforting. And actually something recently, just in a recent sitting, came to mind, which was a very good reminder to me of just this. You know how often we're sitting and we're either wanting or waiting for some better state to arise, more concentrated or whatever it is. But then remembering that all conditioned phenomena are impermanent and unsatisfying. So everything we're wanting to happen falls into that category also. And the Buddha's instruction is, abandon that which doesn't belong to you. If you abandon that which doesn't belong to you, it'll be for your happiness and well-being. Well, what doesn't belong to us? Everything. And so I saw myself practicing wanting to get some better state, which still has to be abandoned as being so. Abandoned here means let go of. Right? So why not let go of whatever's arising now? Why wait for some better state to let go of? It just brings home. It brings home that aspect of the freedom, even on a momentary level, is always available. It's not dependent on a certain state being present, because everything that's arising is going to pass away, right? And so if we just, that's why the remembering that sati means remembering, so it's all about remembering this, right? And so then in our practice, with whatever the object is, in any of the four foundations, the practice remains the same, in some fundamental way. It's being aware of it without holding, without grasping. And so it just makes the freedom aspect of the practice more immediate. It's not some distant, far-off goal. So that's what comes to mind right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Joseph. I'm Mark.
I'm Mark.
So I've heard you talk many times in great depth about mindfulness of body in great detail. And I find that I struggle with getting beyond some kind of basic sensations of pressure, heat, tingling, that sort of thing. It's almost like my mind just doesn't go there, doesn't go any further. And so my question for you is, how do you recommend pursuing this?
I'm not sure what further place you want to get to.
Well, it's like, well, this seems really important to get to more detail, more fine-tuning my awareness of sensation. But I feel like I get to a point and it kind of stays there, and I just stay with it. But there's a sense that my practice might be better if I was, drilling down deeper or experiencing something else.
Okay, so a couple of things. One is, those sensations that you described those are the elements of the body. So it's not that, there's going to be some other huge field of experience. That is the field. In terms of refining, your experience of those very sensations, there are two things that are coming to mind right now. One is, when you listen to kind of the sound of a bell, you can feel, oh, I'm hearing the bell. Or if you kind of just get quiet and receptive, you can hear the many kind of vibratory quality of it. That even within a very short time, there are many arisings and passings within what we're calling the sound of the bell. So the first important level shift in terms of mindfulness of the body is going from the concept level to the level of direct experience. And so you may be feeling something, and just pay attention to whether there's an overlay, a conceptual overlay, like, oh, my shoulder or my back. Because the concept, to the degree that we're on the conceptual level, or even if there's just an overlay of that, the concept doesn't change. Back today, back tomorrow, back yesterday. And so we need to drop into the actual felt sensation of what we're calling back or knee. And so that's the pressure or the tingling or the tightness. So first make sure that you've dropped into that level. Then, rather than the sense of boring deep, why don't you try kind of the other approach of kind of getting very receptive, as if you're listening to it, rather than, rather than, be interesting, rather than observing it, which is, of course, that so much of the language of the practice is about observation. Observe, notice. But that can actually be, that language can be a hindrance. And I found that it's much more helpful to use more receptive language, for example, feeling it rather than observing it. Right? And just that shift of perspective, allows the mind to soften and relax, and just to receive the flow of sensations that are happening. Sometimes the effort of observing actually obscures the refinement. Because we're trying too hard.
Yeah.
It's
resonating. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you might think of what it's like to listen to music, to listen to the sound of a bell, and bring that perspective. Okay, can I just listen to the pressure or the burning? And in that non-doing, that receptive mode, I think you'll become aware of the many nuances of it. The subtle vibrations of it. So that's one practice. There's another way of being with the body that I've found very helpful. I don't think it's actually in the book or in the talks. Have you heard any of the times that I've taught using a phrase from the Satipatthana Sutta, where in the refrain where it says, be mindful, and then in quotes, there is a body, to the extent necessary for clear knowing and continuous mindfulness. And so I've been, both in myself and in teaching, using that phrase, there is a body, really almost as a mental note. So I just want a little sidebar here. A few years ago we were having a big construction project at IMS, building a new dorm. And so it was kind of fun just watching it go up. And as you know, in the building of a house or a structure, first it's framed. So for quite a while, the frame was there, but before it was enclosed. And in that state, you could look through it, right, and see everything that was going on inside. So the phrase, there is a body, in sitting and also in walking, very interesting. We just use that, it's like the frame of the building. It's a very gentle, there's a body, settling into that frame, and then staying open to whatever arises within the frame. So in this case, the mind is not narrowing in on the sensation, rather it's holding the larger context of the frame and simply being aware of whatever's arising within it. Is that clear so far?
Yeah, I can try that.
So in doing that, it's pretty interesting because first it's very relaxed, it's more open, it's not the kind of narrowing of the attention. There is a body. And I think you'll get a better sense or an easier sense of just different sensations appearing and changing and moving within the frame. But you're not zeroing in on them. and you may have a clearer sense of their changing, flowing nature. So in both ways. In one, it is, feeling in a more focused but receptive way, as if you're listening. And the other is giving a wider frame to it.
Yeah.
So both in the sitting and in the walking, I've done this a lot in walking meditation, just, there's a body, that's, and really what the experience becomes, it's just feeling sensations in space. That's the actual felt experience. And it's kind of ironic because in using that, there is a body, we begin to feel that actually there isn't a body. And the body is a concept.
Yeah.
So anyway, these are the two approaches that you might try.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, Joseph. I'm Irene, and thank you for coming. This is a great honor and a little daunting. So my question is about mental noting, and I've kind of come to terms with the fact that it doesn't work for me very well a long time ago. But there's things about it that really appeal to me. The fact that it kind of puts a framework around your experience and keeps you on track. And so I've, numerous attempts at mental noting, and I know that you talk about it and other very well-respected teachers talk about it. And I just can't, it's kind of along the lines of the question that you just answered. It seems like it's better for me to have a somatic experience of whatever the experience is, as opposed to, having to take the, you're talking milliseconds maybe, but to take the time to, put it into a word and then to actually say the word, so you're not actually having the experience of whatever it is you're experiencing. It's...
Yeah.
So I guess I just am looking for an explanation of how it can work for anybody. It just, their minds must work very different than mine or something, I don't know.
First, it's to understand that the mental noting is just a tool. It's not the essence of the practice. So the essence of the practice is the awareness and being mindful. And as you probably know, there are lots of methods that don't use mental noting at all. So it's not a problem. It's not like you need to feel, oh, I need to do this. But in your question, you indicated that, you could see some value in it, if it could work. So what I would do is not undertake it. Well, I'm going to back up a minute. If you want to experiment with it, I would do it in two different ways, and in a way they're a little opposite. You might take short periods, maybe even 5 minutes, at a time in a sitting, where you try to note whatever's arising just for that 5 minutes, and then let it go. And then maybe half an hour later, do another 5 minutes. And just see what the effect is, see whether it actually helps you be more mindful, or more exact or more precise, or not. Does the mind stay as concentrated and connected without it as with it? So it's just a kind of testing for yourself to see, is this helpful without burdening yourself with the idea, oh my God, I need to be doing this for the hour.
And I've done that. I've tried that numerous times, and I always feel like I'm at a lag with experience. With whatever it is that I'm being mindful of. It's happening a fraction of a second after the experience of sort of taking in whatever that thing is.
Right. Well, a couple of things here. One is, especially if things are moving quickly, and there are just many things happening, I wouldn't try to note everything. You might note every 10th object, or You know, because when we're aware of a rapid flow of phenomena, the noting is too slow.
Right.
You know, that process is too slow for what's happening. And so if you're trying to note everything, you can always feel that lag. Whereas if you're in the flow and then, you know, every 10th oct or whatever it is, you just drop a note in acknowledging what's happening. So that might make it more easeful, instead of always feeling like you're a second behind. Right? So another way of doing it is not to try to note in this way, but to reserve this particular tool for when you feel particularly caught or lost.
Right.
You know, when there's a hindrance. So then it can be really helpful as a way of framing it so that you're not so lost in it, so that you're not so identified with it. You know, if there's some strong emotion that's arising, anger, you know, or sadness or whatever. So then you're using it in just a very, what's the word? At very specific times, not trying to do it as a regular tool of
Right.
practice, but as something in your toolbox.
So I deal with chronic pain, so that would probably actually be a really good time to use it, is when I'm getting really caught in the aversion and the,
Yeah.
you know, the
Yeah.
kind of locked in. Yeah.
Yeah. So in speaking of the pain, so this is a good example of an experience I had, which I think I used in the book as well. I was doing it on the other side of getting caught in particular fantasies again and again. And so I started noting pleasant, but I was still getting caught, it was too seductive. And then I started noting contact pleasant. And it was amazing, just the adding of that extra contact, which is the basis for everything else that follows. Contact pleasant. That was enough to unhook the mind. So you could try that with the pain on the other side. Contact unpleasant. You know, because that's really keying you into that law of dependent origination of how, you know, we get caught in the whole
Right.
cycle. And it's the contact feeling, those are the links that are key, you know, or which lead to reactivity of the mind. But adding the note of contact really helped when the reactivity was strong. So that's like a very specific, it's a targeted use of noting
Right.
at specific times. And so that could be worth experimenting with.
But do you
No.
use it all the time? Do you always
Pardon?
use it? Do you always use it?
These days, I don't do much noting at all, you know, because at a certain point when the mindfulness, you know, is reasonably strong, then there's a momentum and it's not even, you don't need it so much.
Right, okay.
So it's really to see when it's helpful, you know, and when and if it's helpful.
Right,
And exploring different possibilities of when it might be helpful. But not to think, oh yeah, I need to, you know, somehow this is the key to the practice.
right. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Joseph. My name is
Hi.
Christine. First of all, thanks so much for staying up so late for us. So my question has to do with your anecdotes and examples that you use in the book. I found them they're very helpful, but many of them are derived from experiences when you're on retreat and life is a little bit simpler and quieter and there's less to focus on. So do you have advice on how to best take lessons that you garner while on retreat back into our messy lives and incorporate them in a useful way?
Well, a big one, and it also refers to some of the things we've talked about already. I mean, one of the foundational practice for the busy life in the world, for me, is mindfulness of the body. You know, because it's always with us. And it's just being in the habit of staying embodied and connected. So whatever we're doing, we can be in the midst of, you know, chaos. Reconnecting with the body is just always a way of coming back to being grounded. In that regard, one of the things I noticed on retreat, but is very applicable in the world, is just keeping an eye out for the experience of rushing. You know, so often in the course of the day, we're just, that feeling is very noticeable. You know, it's not some, if we set the intention to keep an eye out for it, so every time we're rushing, every time we notice that we're rushing, that's like biofeedback. You know, and, oh, okay. Because what does rushing mean? It means that our minds are ahead of ourselves. You know, we're toppling forward a bit. And so every time we recognize that, we just take a moment, you know, stop, take a breath, settle back. And one of the great realizations was that rushing has nothing to do with speed. Because we can be moving very quickly and not rushing. And we can be moving slowly and rushing. You know, so to dissociate it from the speed at which we're doing things, it has more to do with whether we're ahead of ourselves or not. Another huge arena of practice in the world, which again, it comes out of the insights when we're sitting, but the application of it is in the world, is really paying attention to mindfulness of speech, because we talk a lot during the day. And to really make it a practice, as much as possible, to check in with our motivation before we speak. It's huge, you know. So, I mean, besides seeing times when we're, you know, gossiping or speaking in a way that divides people or things as obvious as that, one of the biggest areas of practice for me is paying attention to the useless talk. You know, so often we're just in a social setting with our friends and hanging, and I see these impulse to say something that is completely useless. Basically, it's all about, here I am. You know, it's announcing ourselves. And I find it very interesting to see the impulse to do that, and then in those moments when I'm mindful enough, you know, not to, and the sense of relief, that there's like a conservation of energy. You know, it's a little victory over Mara. So that's another arena, you know, of practice in the world. And again, it comes from recognizing in the sitting when we can see our motivations more clearly. So it's applying that mindfulness of motivation to actions, you know, to our activities in the world. It's really important. You know, there's one teaching that says everything rests on the tip of motivation. So there's, you know, that's such a key element. But I think we don't often take the time, even though it can be just a moment, to really see what our motivation is in various actions. Yeah, and that goes back to one of the first questions about, distinguishing what's wholesome from what's unwholesome. It all has to do with the motivation.
Okay.
So these are just a few of the things that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Hello, Joe. I see people picking up questions as you come up.
They're actually the questions that we wrote down. So we have them in writing in front of us.
But are you asking the question that you wrote?
That is exactly what I'm going to ask you. Thank you, Joseph. I'm Annabeth, and I'm just very grateful that your book has fallen into my hands and that I even get to listen to your talks. And often I'm just silent afterwards. They move me very much. So my question is, could you share, it's very different than all the other questions. Could you share something from your childhood that might have had influence on your mindfulness teaching?
Yes. When I was quite young, from at least as far as my memory goes back, from 3 or 4 or 5 till I was about 11 or 12. I had severe temper tantrums. Things would something would trigger, and I would just, kind of be explosive. Mostly it was directed to my mother, so it made it difficult for her. But it was a lot of suffering, but it just happened. It was kind of seemed outside of my control. But by the time I was 11 or 12, it was just, I didn't like that it happened. Okay. And I remember somewhere around that age, and not knowing, of course, anything about meditation, but somehow it came to mind, okay, before you explode in this, count to 10. Right? And so I would do that, and it would ease. It was a way of not that immediate reactivity. Okay. And so it was really kind of the first bit of mindfulness, even though of course I didn't call it mindfulness or anything like that, right. But it was a tool, that I just sort of came to as a way of pausing a moment before acting, and it really made a huge difference. Okay. So that was one thing. The other big thing that happened kind of in my younger years, went through a period when I was about 12 or 13. My father died very young, and then I had a cousin who died in an accident, and a grandfather died. So right within a year or two, there were these kind of major experiences of death in the family. And it was really powerful. I mean, it was just, again, it was unarticulated to myself at that age, but it was just that sense of somebody being there and not there. And the experience of that was really quite profound. And I think in some way, it was the beginning seeds of understanding non-attachment, or the importance of non-attachment. Again, at the time, I wasn't right. Thinking of it in those terms, but the experience of the impermanence, was so deep. So I think those are a few examples that come to mind.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Very well.
It's me, Albie, again. And I'm bringing you a question from a woman who is not here. She's housebound. She says you don't know her, but she considers you her primary teacher. She sat a retreat with you in 1978, and she's just been practicing.
I remember.
And she just felt so passionate that I asked this question of you. And I think that probably every Dharma teacher has been asked this question. But she said, in thinking about the first precept, that she's very bothered by the condition of ants. And there are in Southern California, as probably many other places, like a zillion ants. And many of them want to come into our homes. And she doesn't want to kill them. And she said when they got in the walls of her house, she found it impossible not to kill them. But it really bothers her. And she wanted me to ask you how she should think about that, how you think about that.
Yeah, no, it's a real life situation, and you know, an ethical dilemma. So, I mean, I think I would frame it in two ways. One is to see when it's possible to remove them without killing. And so, for example, here it's not, especially given the amount of snow we had this winter. I mean, the ants are seasonal right, in Massachusetts. But in the spring, they also come into the house a lot. And so what I found is that I'm actually able, with a, what do you call it? Just like a brush, I actually can sweep them into a dustbin and take them out. And I have to do this a lot in the course of the day. You know, I'm just sweeping them into the dustbin, taking them out. So to whatever extent that's possible, you know, to apply that.
Right.
But there are situations where more drastic action is needed. I mean, if carpenter ants were eating the house, I probably would not say, be happy, you know, go on feasting.
Right.
Something needs to be done. And so then I think it's a question, even if we take that action, you know, of killing beings, to really do it with as much compassion as possible. Even though there will be some aversion in the mind, so that's going to be there, but can we surround that with as much compassion of recognizing what we're doing? There's a teaching which is counterintuitive, but which is, I think, very important, which says that it's better to do an unwholesome action knowing it's unwholesome than to do it without knowing it's unwholesome. And so people often think, oh, if we don't know that it's unwholesome, then it's not so bad. You know, but actually that's just compounding delusion on top of whatever the action is. Whereas if we're doing something unwholesome but we know it, so at least we're bringing some wisdom to that moment. And in this situation, we can also bring compassion and, you know, understanding. But so I think that's kind of the mitigating.
Right.
It's a way of mitigating the unwholesomeness.
And I'm thinking as you're talking that actually there's compassion for the animal and there's compassion for ourselves to be in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, it comes up in a lot of different, what do you do with malaria mosquitoes?
Right.
there are just times when that kind of action is serving some, well, in that case, it would be serving some other good. So it's,
Right.
but this is what makes, for me, the whole field so interesting. You know, and it can really prompt a lot of investigation and, you know, deepening understanding instead of just doing these actions without any thought.
Right.
So I think the person who asked the question already, you know, has given it a lot of thought.
Yes.
And so there's a, you know, the wisdom factor of mind is called investigation of the dharmas. Yeah, and so this is all part of it. And there are times living as lay people in the world where we're going to come up against these ethical dilemmas. So I think it's just bringing as much wisdom and compassion as possible.
Okay. That's really helpful, and she will be very happy to have heard that from you.
Yeah.
And I am aware that it's now 7 o'clock on our time and 10 o'clock your time. And I just want to express tremendous gratitude to you for spending your time with us and for the tapes and the book and everything that you've done for the Dharma and for us. So is there any last thing you want to say?
Yes. Stay mindful. No, it's great. I mean, I have tremendous appreciation for what you're doing and gratified that, you know, the talks in the book has been helpful.
Great.
So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. The miracles of Skype.
The miracles, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Have a good evening.
Okay, you too.